Hey everybody, welcome back to the Everyday Adventure Podcast. Steven here and joined by Megan. How's it going, Megan?
I'm good. How are you?
So good. So good. I'm excited for this episode. Before we get into it though, I feel like this is an appropriate time to talk about how we picked up Sudoku in our house very recently.
Yeah, tell me about that. What do you want to talk about?
You know, Sudoku is something that I just avoided for many, many years, but it was like we wanted something that wasn't a show and that was just like, we can do it together. And so we started doing Sudoku and puzzles. And it reminds me of my grandpa who does crossword puzzles. And for Christmas for the last like several years, all we've gotten him is like crosswords and then like mazes. And, you know, like we've been doing those with the kids and stuff. And they loved me to draw them. And it reminds me of what we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's really funny. I also, how do you say it?
Sudoku?
Sudoku?
Yeah.
That's never how I pronounced it my whole life.
It could be Sudoku.
I don't know. Now I don't know which one's right and which one I said, but
comment below.
Comment below your thoughts. But yeah, we kind of went through this. We're kind of leaving a series of reflecting and looking back, and now it's like, where are we today? Who are we today? And I think that's where you're getting at with like the mazes and things, like where are you right now in order to see where else you want to go. And so we have a special guest on the podcast today.
Yeah, we're joined by Ryan Wekenman, who I just met, and you'll see on his book cover is a maze. So that was part of that too. That was where I was going. I looked down and I was like, oh, I can talk about that. But Ryan, he wrote a book called Free Me From Me. He is the teaching pastor at Red Rocks Church in Austin, Texas, where he planted that church with a few best friends a few years ago. And he is just a great storyteller. He also wrote another book called Single Today, and we're going to have him back on for an episode just about really embracing those seasons and those times in our life and those situations in our life that are sometimes harder. But this episode was really identifying where we are in what he calls the me maze, and how easy it is to be self-centered in a God-centered world. Like when we want to follow God and put him at the center, why is it so hard? And so this episode is really deep in some ways, but also fun in some ways. He shares about what he calls overdosed on self-help, and I think a lot of us can resonate with that. And so I'm excited for this episode, and we're so excited. What are we going to do after the episode?
Well, we'll give a book away.
We will. We are going to give a book away because that's what we do when we have somebody on, and something just a little family business. When we have a guest on that has a book, it's not because they have a book. We've realized that these conversations fit into what we're doing. And so right now we're talking about You're Here. And I think one of the best ways to talk about that is to identify that whether or not we are at the center of the world or if God's the center of the world, and how that affects everything that we do moving forward. And so I'm excited for this one. So let's jump into this episode with Ryan Wekenman. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode. I've got Ryan Wekenman here. How are you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing so good, man. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome to the Everyday Adventure Podcast. We're pumped to have you. I know you've got a little bit going on right now as you just released a brand new book, which is super exciting. Just tell us a little bit about, just kind of not necessarily the book itself, but just kind of who you are and just the overview of that journey in itself.
Yeah. You're right. Every day is currently an adventure for me. And I know the premise, that's true every day. But right now I'm certainly feeling it. You know this process well. The book release season is pretty wild. But yeah, my name's Ryan. I live in Austin, Texas. I'm the teaching pastor of a church called Red Rocks Austin. And now the author of 2 books. So the second one, Free Me From Me, just came out. And it's really a book about all of my insecurities of being a pastor. And so felt like I would just what's funny is my first book is about singleness, which is the topic that I feel like that's the thing I'm best at. This is a book about the thing that I'm worst at.
Okay.
And we can get into all of that, but it just felt like time to put all of those stories down on paper and really honestly just lay it all out. And excited about how it turned out.
That's awesome. I feel, just really resonated with so many of the stories and so much of what you were sharing that I've been excited to have this conversation. And really, kind of the idea of um, helping people get from where they are to where they're going is a big part of this. And just the understanding that life is an adventure with God, that it's not just like a boring business trip that we have to follow these rules and get to where, but it's like he's inviting us to come with him. And so I think one of the biggest, most important things is having an understanding of where we actually are. And, I think there's the external aspect of it, like, what am I doing for work? But you really hit on kind of that internal journey. And so do you mind just kind of sharing like how you got to that kind of understanding, really this idea of a me-centered world, versus a God-centered world?
Yeah, that quote, I don't know who it is. You probably do. Life is not a problem to solve. It's an adventure to live. That resonates with like the deepest part of me, because I typically wake up feeling like life is a problem to solve. And because of that, I am so prone to put myself at the center of this story and start with me and start from a place of, oh no, we've got a problem and I better figure it out. And so I am my own shepherd and I got to go make something happen today, as opposed to, no, God's actually got this figured out. And God is inviting me to be a part of this adventure that he's calling me to live. And so for me, I decided to write this book because of how often I find myself putting myself at the center of the story. And the language that I use in the book is, I call it the me maze, where the difference between a self-centered start to the day and a God-centered start to the day. When I start with self, I find myself like trapped in this maze where I'm like running as hard as I can all day, and I'm working so hard all day, but I just can't seem to escape. And everything ultimately comes back to me, 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 me. My prayers are about me. All my thoughts are about me. Everybody who gets in my way on the highway is an inconvenience to me, and I can't believe that they're getting in the way, or I can't believe that there's this many people in the coffee shop, so I can't get a table, and everyone's trying to sabotage like me, 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 me. And so, yeah, man, that's the heartbeat of the book, and the heartbeat of my message right now is how often I think about me, where the inverse and the invitation in scripture is to realize, oh, actually, I'm not my own shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. And so I'm going to put the Lord back at the center of this story. And then I'm going to take a really deep exhale, and I'm going to realize that because the Lord is my shepherd, I actually lack nothing, and he is leading me every step of the way. And so I can release some control and see people around me as people to love instead of a bunch of problems to solve.
That's so good. I'm excited to unpack this because I think everybody that just listened to that can probably resonate somewhere. Like school pickup and drop off right now has been my nemesis. And, yes. I had to like have a sit down with my two kids who I'm dropping off at school and be like, hey, Dad's reaction to the drop off line is not right. I'm working on that. Because I'm like, how dare you not drive all the way around? I need to be there. But I think the message that you're sharing right now is so important for each and every one of us, because I think we are in a me-centered world, where there's a lot of me-centered people, and that we bump into each other. And but I think for me, I was looking at my own journey as I was reading about yours, and there was kind of this synced up nature of, I went through a phase where I was really growing in my relationship with the Lord, and that caused me to look at myself, and I really started reading every self-help book, I was like, man, this stuff is so good because I want to be better with my time. I want to be better with my relationships, or whatever the case was. And you share a story, and your words were that you overdosed on self-help. And I laughed as I was reading it, but also I resonated with that, because I think for me at least, it felt like a God started quest of like, I want to grow.
I want to be the best version of myself for God, but it gets twisted so easily. At least it did for me. So share just
So easily.
that quick story and just that aspect.
Yeah, it's so funny because self-help's not the problem, right?
Yeah.
The problem is thinking that self-help can save you. That's the
Right.
that's the thesis here. So for me, it was during 2020. It was during COVID, and
Which is so great because everybody was doing
dude.
as much of that stuff. We were all, I had a new morning routine, it's everything.
Yeah, and it was super helpful, right? It's just
Yeah.
that just because a little helps doesn't mean a lot will help more. And I took that theory to the limit. So it was a Sunday, and our church was a year old and was starting to gain momentum when the world shut down. And so we had to, like so many people, we had to move online. And that Sunday there was like 20 something people watching, because it's so great on YouTube because it tells you exactly how bad you're doing, and so I'm sitting there going like the church isn't going to work. Like we're done. COVID took us out. And so that afternoon, I'm starting to spiral, and I am like, okay, I know what helps. I gotta work out, and then I gotta get my cold plunge, and then I need to do breath work, and I need to get out in my backyard, and I need to ground, and like all of these like good things. But what ends up happening is I'm getting anxious, and so I double down and I work out twice, and then I'm doing this Wim Hof breath work, which whatever, podcast for another day. But long story short, you have to do a long breath hold at the end. And so I'm out of the cold plunge. I'm doing my second round of breath holds, and I decide like I should go out to my backyard so I can get my like bare feet on the earth. And you're not supposed to move, by the way, while you're doing Wim Hof. Disclaimer. But I do, and I'm like hobbling through my kitchen trying to get to my backyard. I open the slider, still holding my breath, and I put my chair down in my grass, and bro, that's the last thing that I remember. I come to, and I'm just sprawled out, face down in my own backyard. I passed out. I held my breath too long that I literally passed out. And it's such a funny image for me, because like I have no idea, like we were all on shutdown. I have no idea how long I was. It could have been 5 seconds. It could have been 5 minutes.
Right.
But like my neighbors were probably looking at me just like, oh no, like Ryan's like coming off a bender right now. And the line that just makes me laugh is like, I didn't overdose on drugs. I overdosed on self-help. And that picture for me is, it's become a gift for me. It's a picture of where it leads when you try to figure this out on your own. Is you can try and you can try and you can try, and a little bit can help, but a lot doesn't help a lot more. In fact, you can overdose on self-help. And so it's an embarrassing story, but it's fun for me because I'm like, look at Ryan like during COVID trying to figure this out while putting himself at the center of the story. Whereas what I could have done is like gone for a walk and gone, hey Lord, I'm really scared right now. Like I'm feeling all the feelings right now. I'm nervous. The world is so unpredictable at the moment. I don't know if the church is going to work. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling angry, and if I was healthy, this is what I would have done. And I probably would have cried for a little bit. Instead, I just held my breath until I passed out. And to me, I'm like, that is the picture of really what I'm trying to get at in the book is there's two different starting points. You either start with self and put self at the center and end up passed out in your own backyard, or you put God at the center, and that's really where all the freedom is found.
We've got an exciting event to share with you today.
Yeah, Slow Down Saturday is coming up on June 6th from 9 to noon. We're super excited about it. Tell us a little bit more. What can they expect?
Slow Down Saturday, I believe, is 3 hours that can transform your next 3 months. What we're going to do is really come to grips with where we are today and really set a course for what would make this summer an amazing summer. The reality is so many of us drift, and we'll get to the end of the summer and say, where did summer go? go. And so this day is really designed to help you say, hey, I want to have a great summer, and I'm going to set a course for what that looks like. And we're going to do it in community with some amazing people. So make sure you come to Slow Down Saturday.
Yeah, to learn more or to register, you can go to journeyway.co.
We'll see you there.
Yeah, and you really kind of hit this idea that the self is the pressure. Like when we put ourself at the center, it builds pressure. What happens when we put God at the center and, contrast that a bit?
Yeah, well, I think Matthew 11:28-30 is the perfect answer to that question, where Jesus goes, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened." And for me, seasons where I put myself at the center of the story, if I'm just being honest, I feel weary and I feel burdened, because the truth is there is a lot of pressure to being at the center of this story. Life is really hard.
Yeah.
And ultimately it promises freedom, but ultimately it just leads to feeling a pressure that we weren't created to handle. But Jesus goes on to say, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened," and he'll say, "And I will give you rest." And goes on to say, you'll find rest for your soul. And so I think the answer in one phrase to what happens when we put God back at the center, I think the answer is you find rest for your soul. So you think about even like self-care. Right, because by the way, the reason I wrote this book is because we're getting inundated with the message "start with self" like 10,000 times. Self-care is another example. Self-care is a good thing with a horrible starting point. It's trying to take care of yourself while starting with the self. And again, that's why like you get home from your vacation and you're like, I need a vacation for my vacation. Or like you try to do all the things and you're like, why am I still tired? I'll tell you why you're still tired. It's because you still have self at the center of the story. But when you go to Jesus first, he tells us, I'll give you rest for your soul. And so for me, if rest starts with the self, the best you can hope for is self-care. But if rest starts with God at the center, you actually get the soul care that your soul is desperate for.
That's so good. I think just that idea you just shared, just that from the rest part, the pressure versus rest. And I think that's probably the biggest difference that I've experienced in my own life is whether it was during kind of that morning routine phase where I was like, I added probably 12 things to it. Like I have a notebook that it's like, it was every few minutes. And the first probably 2 days was like, wow, that was awesome. But then I was literally anxious that I was doing it wrong, that I was rushing it or that I was going too slow or that it's taking too long. And just the opposite of what I was hoping for came out of it. Like I did not feel more rested. I did not feel more energized or ready for my day.
So good. Such a perfect example.
For me, it's like the counter to that was recognizing, whoa, what if I just sat with the Lord a little longer today? What if I went on a walk, like you said, instead of doing 20 push-ups and 50 sit-ups and drinking a cold glass of water first thing out in the morning, what if I just got out of my house and just put on my shoes and just started walking without any distractions? And I think that kind of paints that picture. And I know for me, and I know many people listening, that me maze sounds quite familiar, but I think what I really enjoyed about your book is that you kind of break that down into 4 layers. It's not just this like mythical me maze and how do I get out of it, but there's layers to it. Like what are those layers and how would you describe those?
Yep. So for me, everybody's got their own me maze and everybody's me maze looks different. The more I have these conversations, the more I realize it's really all pretty similar. It typically comes down to 4 layers, 4 roles. It's the performer, the comparer, the avoider, and the controller. So break those down for 1 second. For me, the number one tell that I'm caught in the me maze is I've gone into performer mode, where I am trying to impress, where instead of being in a conversation with somebody and thinking about them, I'm thinking about my own performance and how am I doing in this conversation right now? How am I being funny enough? Am I being smart enough? Am I being caring enough?
Do I look like I'm listening?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's so much of our jobs with podcasts, even where it's like we have these messages that we care about so deeply and we want the world to know, but there is like a performative nature even in what we're doing right now, And so I don't know about you, but I catch myself sometimes going like, man, I'm not like caring about this person I'm talking to right now. I'm thinking about my performance in this podcast. And so even in like my job, I have all of these moments where I can just go, oh Lord, I'm doing that thing again. I'm performing. Lord, would you free me from me? And would you help me just love the person that I'm talking to and love the audience that I'm talking to? Less of me, more of you.
Yeah.
So that's that first layer is the performer. And then underneath that is the comparer. So much of I always feel like the performer is like the puppet and the comparer is the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. Because so much of life, and I think the reason why we perform is because we look around and we go, yeah, but how am I doing compared to everybody else? And especially when you get into to spiritual stuff, like spiritual practices can so quickly turn into this big comparison game. So like, instead of just praying to pray, it's praying to pray more than somebody else. Or it's like, how am I doing serving? Or how am I doing giving? Or how am I doing fasting? Man, comparison is wild. And then for me, beneath that is realizing how often I do all of that stuff to avoid some of the deeper inner work. And then beneath that is the controller, where ultimately all of this is just me trying to control. And so I feel it right now in this conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like we could dive into an hour on any of those. But I would love to hear, as you read, did those 4 resonate with you, and did one of those stick out to you?
For sure. I think it felt like a journey, kind of unlocking kind of something else that it pointed to. But the performer side of it was one, you shared a story in the book about kind of moving a prayer time to the front porch and just kind of like, the roomies or the friends are going to come and I want them to see me, and I think especially early in my faith journey, I was put into kind of leadership positions that I felt like I was ill-equipped for, that I was too young. I looked at, then the comparer side, like I looked at the guys that, invited me into these things, and I was like, man, I don't add up. Like my prayer life when they pray out loud versus when I pray out loud. So that comparer side, but that performer, like it led me to, I need to sound a certain way, look a certain way. And so it was each of those moments, leading a small group, thinking about, do I sound spiritual enough? Do I look like I understand scripture enough? And that pivoted over the years, and just recognizing that it's way more fun and meaningful and restful when you just look at the guys and say, how can I love you? How can I care about you? Like you were just saying. But I think that performative one, and I remember, being in a position where I wasn't preaching as often, and I was asked to preach on a Sunday morning. And as I was preparing, I was working out lines that would sound better. And I was like, what am I doing? Why am I trying? And I think there's value to making it as clear as possible and making sure. But there was a pivot of just, I need to refocus this and just, God, what are you trying to communicate, and how can I trust you in it? And so that performer one, I feel like jumped out a ton for me.
Dude, yes, 100%. And you hit on this. It's so tricky in in ministry, but also whatever your vocation as you're listening to this, there's this tension where you go, yeah, but working hard to make something excellent so that it's helpful for people, that's actually a very God honoring thing, until, to your point, it becomes less about I'm doing this to help you or doing this to glorify God, and becomes I'm doing this to impress people. And so a lot of this journey for me has been figuring out, okay, which hours of this sermon prep is to clarify my point and to help it be memorable and helpful and point people to Jesus, and which hours of this message prep are me thinking about how other pastors are going to see it and what they're going to think, and how it measures up to that other guy on YouTube who says things so well, and all of that. And so yeah, man, so much of this free me from me journey is comes down to being like learning to be really, really, really honest with myself, with yourself, and going like, okay, at what level am I putting God at the center of the story and doing this to glorify God? And is there a moment where I've put myself back at the center of the story and I'm now performing? And what's interesting, man, is like the internet is really good at calling this out now. Like, think about all of the like performative type memes and stuff out there.
Right.
It's like everything is called performative now. It's almost like Gen Z just has like a crazy discernment for inauthenticity, where they can just know, they can just tell like this isn't actually true right now. This person is trying to perform.
Right.
And I think that's a really good, healthy thing. It's just very convicting for me because I find myself performing so much.
Well, and I think the thing that I was kind of coming back to, and I think a lot of people will resonate with this too, is that I think the first step of this is we turn kind of deeper into self. At least I do, and I'm thinking about how self-focused I am preparing that message, and my probably initial gut reaction was to dig in deeper to that self thing instead of turning that to the God side of it. And we see that, and you write about this, Adam and Eve, Adam and Eve, that first kind of sin moment where the serpent really tempts them into that self-centered versus God-centered life. Did God really say? And what do? They hide, and they have the fig leaves. And that's something that you write about, is like, what are your fig leaves? And that's such a good question, a great inventory. I love kind of inventories a little bit of when we can get honest about what is it that I use to cover that? What is it that I use to cover those insecurities, those failings, those shortcomings, those me-centered aspects of it? And, raising your hands higher in worship with the intention of, will pastor see me doing this? It's like, it's all counterintuitive. It all gets it wrong, but talk about the fig leaves thing a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that was great, man. I think that we have made tremendous upgrades in the costume department from the first performance. Adam and Eve. And to be fair, their performance was very rushed and unexpected. But all they had to cover up were some fig leaves. And today we have, okay, I'm just going to be really smart, and that's how I'm going to hide. I'm going to be really spiritual, and that's how I'm going to hide. I'm going to be really rich, and if I can have a big enough house, then that's how I'm going to hide. Or a cool enough car, that's how I'm going to hide. Or if I can be funny enough, or if I can be pretty enough, or if I can have enough followers on social media, then maybe people will see that. They'll look at me and they'll see that instead of seeing who I actually am. And what we see, and I just see this in my own life all of the time, is it's actually my own insecurity of I don't want people to see who I really am. And so for me, I'm going to write a book that's smart enough that people are going to look at the book that I wrote and they'll get distracted, you know,
Right.
and they'll just talk about how smart I am or funny I am or whatever, and they won't really see me. And the great irony, of course, is that it just doesn't work. It is you could be the most successful or whatever, however you like to cover up, and still be insecure, because ultimately those are just fig leaves. Those are things that we're using to cover ourselves up. They're performances that we're doing to try to distract people from seeing who we really are. And the deeper truth here that I'm trying to get at is ultimately life is about being fully known and truly loved. And
Yeah.
it starts with realizing that that's how God sees you, that God's not actually impressed by any of our fig leaves. He loves the adventure that we're on, to your message and your point, and all the things that we're doing along the way, but it's not actually the outcome that impresses him. It's the journey that you go on together, because he actually sees through all of the facade, all of the performance, and he sees who you really are, and he loves you. So you're fully known and you're truly loved by God. It's just that I have a really hard time believing that. And another layer of that is I also have a hard time believing that about other people, because God's love is unconditional. People's love is very conditional, right? And that's where, like, you see marriage probably being the closest thing to this. And I know nothing about marriage. I've been single my entire life. But in theory, on paper, what I hear from my friends is when you can get to the point where you're being truly known by each other and still fully loved, like that's where that's the good stuff. And so I think that ultimately this book is a call to realize that God sees you as you are. He sees through the performance. He says, "Oh, that's cute, Ryan. Look at you doing, you know, like trying to act and pretend like you got all this figured out. I see beyond that, and guess what? I love you right where you are. And man, I don't get it all the time, but on the moments that I get it, it's like, that feels like freedom."
Two things you just said. There's this aspect of it where it's always going to be a mix. There's a mix in it. And, you know, you were talking about writing a book, and there's probably many times that this book was written from a place of, you know, I'm thinking about the person reading it. And then there's probably a few of those moments that it trickled into that other aspect of it. And I would say that's something that I would encourage a listener to really to give grace for, is that this is a journey. And you said that word journey, and God's about that journey, because we're going to get it right, we're going to get it wrong. However, what I want to kind of turn this conversation towards is what are some practical things? What are some centering things that we can talk about that help us go from that self-centered place to that God-centered place? And just from your life, but also from your relationship to others, because you've spent a lot of time with different people. And before that, though, one part of the Adam and Eve thing that I've always been fascinated by is God's question of, where are you? And it's only logical to believe he knew exactly where they were, because he is God. However, to me, that's always been a self-identification question. Like, before we can move forward, before we can come back to that God center, we do have to admit that I'm over here. I'm hiding from you, God. I'm hiding, and I've sowed these fig leaves, and I'm naked, and now I've recognized that I'm naked.
Wow.
But so many times we bypass that step, and we aren't willing to kind of face that mirror and look ourselves in that place and answer that question honestly of, God's asking, where are you? And I think he's asking every person, like, where are you?
Wow. I love that. Yeah, you could almost boil down the whole thesis of this book to that question.
Yeah.
Where are you currently? Are you in the me maze? Do you have self at the center, or do you have God at the center?
Yeah.
Because that's the moment, to your point, where it flipped. Before Genesis 3 and Genesis 1 and 2, like, we wouldn't need this book because they
Right.
had God at the center, and they were living a constant adventure of glorifying God by living out the way that we were supposed to live with God at the center. It wasn't until that moment that they put self back at the center. So, man, I love that, thinking about that question, where are you? Is God first going, hey, I just need you to be aware of this, and then we can move forward. Great one.
Yeah. So with that, kind of answering that question of where are you, is that the place to kind of start when it comes to how do we move from self-centered to God-centered? And what will that look like practically?
Yep. And you already alluded to this, but I think it's important to say again. It starts with asking, where are you, and going very, very easy on yourself.
Yeah.
And so this has been a problem ever since the garden. And so you are in good company with every human except for Jesus.
Isn't it so right onto the message in the heart of this, though, that we would think that I'm the first, I'm the only, I'm the worst? I think we get stuck even in that because we are so self-centered that we're like, I know what Adam and Eve did, but this is worse.
Oh, bro, I'm the only one who has outsmarted God so much that I have my own me maze.
Yeah. Yeah.
We get self-centered about how self-centered we are. That's so funny. So much of writing this book has been that, like, very weird trip for me of, like, why am I writing a book about being self-centered and all of the stories are about me? What am I doing?
It's helpful. I appreciate that you did. It unlocks some things.
So from this place, like what we're doing right now, we're outsmarting shame. We're laughing about this.
Yeah.
We're just acknowledging, like, of course I'm back at the center of the story. I'm a broken human. Like,
right.
Yeah, obviously I'm going to do this thing again. And so there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Lord, free me from me is a prayer I've had to pray 10,000 times. I've prayed it 5 times already today. I'm going to keep praying it, but it doesn't come with any shame for me. And I think that that's really, really important for everybody to hear. Now, from that place of outsmarting the shame, I do think there are a couple of practices that I've found really, really helpful for getting out of the center. For me, one of the biggest ones is intercessory prayer, which is just a fancy way of saying praying for other people.
Yeah.
So years ago, a mentor of mine sat me down and he was like, hey, let's talk about your prayer life. And I was young in my faith and I thought I had it dialed, like as we do early on. And I was ready to be like, oh yeah, my prayer life is second to none, And he goes, okay, great. So if you had a transcript of all of your prayers from the last 24 hours, and I beat him to the punch, I was like, it would be really long. I pray for a lot of people all the time. And he goes, okay, that's great. Here's my real question. What percentage of those prayers have been for other people? And I had this moment where I'm like, oh no, right. Honestly, not many at all. It's all been about me. Now, there's nothing wrong with praying for yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just that shifting those prayers or a percentage of those prayers, I call it turning from me prayers to we prayers, where I start going, okay, I'm going to start praying for other people right now. I'm going to start praying for my family right now. I'm going to start praying for my friends right now. I'm going to start praying for the people at my church right now. It shifts everything. And then to take this a level deeper, when you start praying for the people that you compare yourself to, that's like a level 2 type of a prayer. Because whatever realm you live in, maybe it's you're at your job and there's a couple of different people fighting for a promotion, and you can't help but compare yourself to them and try to look for all of their flaws. If you first just like stopped and said, Lord, would you bless them and would you provide for them, and would you remind them that you love them, and like at first it's always going to feel kind of forced, but if you keep going, suddenly it's like it breaks these chains off of you, and it pulls you right out of the me maze so quickly. And so for me, like with book stuff, you know how the book world like creates that real great hierarchy where we can like know like who's selling how many copies and who's doing what and whatever, and it like breeds comparison. For me, man, I get so insecure with all that stuff that I just have to stop and go, like, I'll literally go through other authors who I envy, and I go, Lord, thank you for them. Thank you for their message. Would you bless them? Continue to provide for them. Would you make your face shine upon them? And everything in my flesh will be like, what are you doing right now? Like if God blesses them, then we're going to lose ground. But man, my spirit comes alive where I start to realize like, oh, that's right. This is a silly game that I don't need to be playing. And so, yes, Lord, bless them. And so, I would say probably the most effective one for me is praying for other people.
That's so good. There is something about that, even just in my own journey. That was a starting point for me. I had a mentor that really, hey, make a list of classmates, even professors. And there was something that happened as life got busier for me that it drifted, and, praying for the things closer to home just became more natural. I think maybe it was because I was 18 and there wasn't much going on in here or in my life. And, but I remember like as I had financial issues to take care of, or as, I graduated and I had loans, or I was in relationships, like it kind of became that more self-centered. And one thing that even was brought up for me thinking about this was there's people in my life that I don't know their inner battle. Like I don't know their mimes, if their generosity or their other focus is some sort of performative thing. However, what I've gathered is like we had a friend that felt led to buy our kids Christmas, or like give us money to buy our kids Christmas gifts one year. They didn't know we weren't like talking about any struggles, but Taylor and I, my wife, that Christmas, we were kind of like, hey, I think we just have to downshift a little bit. And we were dealing with some kind of like, oh man, we want to give them this Christmas. And it was just this huge blessing. And I remember thinking how special it is that person, we were just thinking about our Christmas, like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And they were sitting there going, who can we bless? Like, what is it? How can we use what we have for others? And just that outward focus in general with our prayers, just with our lives, I think is a huge part of it. And one other thing I want you to just speak to briefly is just the idea of breath prayer, because I believe that there's maybe some that would kind of hear that from more of a quote unquote self-help place, or that Wim Hof, I watched some of those documentaries during COVID and, all of that. And they think like, is that godly? Is that what we should do? So explain that from your side.
Yeah, it's a great question. I like to say, first off, breath prayer has, been a part of our tradition since God breathed life into a pile of dust in Genesis 2.
Yeah.
And so like life began with God's exhale and our inhale. And when you trace back in Christianity, you can trace it back hundreds of years that we've been combining our breath with our prayers. However, to be fair to the question asker, so breath is like a vehicle. You can use a vehicle to go to a good place. You can also use a vehicle to go to a bad place. And so Yeah, like when you look at some of the holotropic breathwork courses and things like that, that use breathwork with self as the starting point. That's not what we're talking about when we talk about breath prayer. For me, breath prayer is combining a verse of scripture with your breath. And so I like to, or just a prayer, but I like to use a verse of scripture. Just like that's kind of a basic, fundamental way to make sure we're grounding ourselves in a God-centered reality as we head into breath prayer. And so for me, I'll take a verse like Psalm 23, verse 1, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. And I'll break it in half and do the first half on the inhale and the second half on the exhale. So it's, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. And I'll slow down my breath and do that about 10 times. And what you find is, first off, we live in a day and age where everything is go, go, go so fast that everything becomes shallow, even our breaths. And when you stop and take a deep breath, it's like your body comes alive in a new way. That's why, like, even they'll tell athletes or somebody before a big game or before a big test, what do? You go,
Yeah.
right? There's something grounding about that. Well, to me, I go, okay, so let's combine that with scripture.
Yeah.
Let's do it continuously. And I'll do this before a sermon pretty much every single week, where I'll stop and I'll just go, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. And it's a fun way to get out of my own head and into my body. Because for me, the way that the Lord created me, I'm just very cerebral in so much of my life, and that's great, and that's a great gift. The downside is it's harder for me to sink into my heart and sink into my body. And so breath prayer has been a really effective way for me to do that. It reminds me, first and foremost, that every breath I have is a gift from God. And then it just helps me connect scripture at a layer that's somewhere deeper than just in my mind.
I love that. And I know other authors, Christian speakers have kind of dug into this in recent years in a helpful way. And, one of the things that I have done more of is, even as I was reading your book, there was things that weren't written as breath prayers that came out of, even I breathe in that you are at the center. I breathe out that I am not, like just even releasing on those exhales too is something that I've realized of, just breathing in rest, exhaling pressure, just releasing those pressure points and naming them. But so much practical stuff here. And I can't say enough how much people need to read Free Me From Me. I know it's out now, all of that, but there's a couple things before we end here we do with our guests. And I want to invite you into this because what you're speaking of really hits what I care about most, and what I really have this podcast for is to help people embrace the adventure God has for them. And that starts with recognizing that I bring in some things in. One of the biggest things that holds people back is what they carry with them. If we're on a backpacking trip and we've got 50 pounds of stuff, we're not going to get very far, or we're going to be very sore. And so there's things to let go of. And this is an invitation to do so. But two questions I ask everybody. I didn't even prep you on this, so this is my bad. But
let's go.
One of the things that I found really helpful, and I think it ties in too, is anticipation and celebration. That sometimes when we look at the grand scheme of our life, we get into these rhythms of, man, I've got 3 months until my next vacation, or I graduate in 3 years and I've just got to endure. But really, when we draw that circle of anticipation closer and we look forward to more, we see God in more of our life. And so what is something right now that we'll start on celebration, but it can be a small thing, it can be a big thing, and it can be your book. But what is something you're celebrating?
No, I just got back last night from a trip to the beach with some really good friends, like lifelong friends. And I think what I want to celebrate is the older I get, the more I realize being together is really what this is all about. And so I want to celebrate that this group, like we've been through life together and the ups and downs and all of that. But it just means the world to me that I have friendships that mean more than, like, the trip was great and the things we did were really fun, but being together was really the thing that matters. And so, I want to celebrate that God's brought really good people into my life.
Amazing. And then what's something you are looking forward to, you're anticipating right now? It could even be today.
Yep. I'm trying to not do book stuff. You know how this gets, where it's like it's all consuming for me, because I have a lot of like fun things coming up that I'm anticipating about the book.
In the build up to my launch, I resorted to it almost every time. Like I have a co-host that helps me with a lot of episodes, and she's like, "Hey, you got to probably figure something else out."
I have to, like, even in conversations with people, I'm like, Ryan, don't talk about your book. Don't talk about your book. Don't talk about, you know? Okay. Well, okay. So I get to go to Hawaii every summer.
No way.
I have one of my best friends in the world, Matt, and his wife Jess. They live out there, and we call it Ryan Week. They just let me come out, and they've got 2 awesome kids, and we just surf and eat good food and hang out. And so that is coming up again, and that's become, like, it's honestly more of my New Year than January. You know, like when I go to Hawaii in the summertime, it's like that's ending the chapter on 1 year and resting and then getting ready for the second. And so I am anticipating a great trip to Hawaii.
That's awesome. Look at you being rebellious, making your own New Year. You know, why not? Right. That's awesome. Well, hey, this was such a fun conversation. It was great to chat with you. And obviously, if you're listening, make sure you get Free Me for Me. You know, where can people get it? But also, where can people connect with you, Ryan?
Yeah, so it's available now wherever books are sold. Amazon's probably the easiest, but it's on Barnes & Noble and Mardell and Books A Million and all of those spots. And then I'm most active on Instagram, although by most, I mean, not super active, but I'm trying to be more active.
You'll be for the next few months.
Yeah, that's right. And then, so that's the best place to connect with me. And if you're ever in Austin, Red Rocks, Austin, is the church, and we'd love to have you. But man, I love the premise of this podcast and of your book and everything that you are doing. And so, thank you truly for letting me play a small role in it and keep going.
Hey, no, I appreciate it. Glad you could come on. And I know we didn't even touch your other book. And I just think that's embracing the season you're in is a big part of what we try to talk about. And, you know, I'd love to have a conversation about that from your vantage point. But thanks so much for hanging out with us today. And thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate you.
Thanks, bro.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I enjoyed my conversation with Ryan, but Megan, what was kind of your big takeaway from this episode?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, what stood out to me was this idea of fig leaves he talked about in his book with like Adam and Eve, and they hid behind fig leaves. But the idea today that they're not physical leaves, but a lot of times there's other things that we're hiding behind, performance or successes, and we're hiding our true selves. And so we have to learn to move past the leaves. And so that was really interesting to me, and I'm definitely reflecting on that coming out of the episode.
For sure. And there's so many things that you can reflect on, and we'd love to hear what you're reflecting on. And also we would love to invite you into this week's Everyday Adventure Challenge. And this one, again, is kind of coming straight from the conversation. We're calling it the Breath Prayer Challenge. It's just a very simple way to describe it. But he shares, not only in his book, but on the episode, about kind of like Christ-centered breath prayer. I know breath prayer is something that in like the self-help movement has a different meaning altogether, but really breath prayer, when we focus on breathing, which God gives the air in our lungs, we can actually use that as an opportunity to center ourselves back on God. And so he has this breath prayer where he goes through Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. And as you inhale, you are recognizing that he is your shepherd. And so we're going to have this during the broadcast channel on our Everyday Adventure Instagram. Thank you. And you can join that. And every one of these challenges is there with the instructions and what that looks like. And so encourage you to do it with us this week. And we're giving away this book, this very book that's in my hands. And so you can win this book from Ryan. And so again, check out our Instagram. All the details for how to win this book will be there. So we're pumped that you're listening. Subscribe. What else should they do?
Probably share it with a friend as well.
Yeah. What else?
Like the episode. Follow us. Follow us on the Everyday Adventure Instagram.
Yes. And come back next week for another episode of the Everyday Adventure podcast. We'll see you later.